Hello.
Dad, I gotta write a report on the Great Lakes.
Just outsource it to Lisa. Outsourcing is the answer to everything.
Also, I can't sleep at night because there's this new bully who follows me home and I think he's in the house.
Outsourcing.
I am very glad to see you favor outsourcing. I myself have found work with several American companies. Oh, IBM Helpline, this is Brian. Have you tried disabling your firewall? Dallas Fort Worth Marriott, how can I help y'all? Well, we have a cotton bowl special. Go Aggies! This is Queen Mama Jumbo. The stars tell me you have a question. Oh no, Janet, don't be dating that boy. The bones don't lie. He's bad mojo, girl.
It turns out that outsourcing isn't the answer to everything, like Homer suggests in this episode of The Simpsons. But outsourcing can be an effective way for businesses to focus their people on the core functions of the business while ensuring that the non-core functions are still taken care of. But outsourcing isn't a decision to be taken lightly, and finding the right partner, whether they're onshore, nearshore, or offshore, can be quite an undertaking. Tyler Orrell is a CX zealot who spent over 2 decades leading and developing contact centers all over the world. This week on Next in Queue, we discuss the nebulous nature of the terms onshore and offshore when it comes to outsourcing, reasons you might want to consider outsourcing, things to consider when making an outsourcing decision, the various types of work that a BPO can handle for organizations, how an organization can navigate finding an outsource partner, how technology impacts any outsourcing decision, and how to create a successful relationship with an outsource provider. Let's get to it.
Welcome to Next in Queue, the podcast for contact center and customer experience professionals. Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy 2 Vision. Eliminate blind spots and see right through every conversation with Happy 2 Vision. Learn more at happitu.com. Now, here's your host, Rob Dwyer.
Thanks everyone for joining another episode of Next in Queue. My name is Rob Dwyer, and today I am joined by Tyler Orrell. Tyler, how are you? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hey, I'm doing really well. It's April. Things are moving towards spring, which everybody's excited about, especially in the Northwest and Pacific Northwest. Getting out of the rain if possible, but things are good. Yeah, my background, Rob, is really in contact center space, and I've been in here for many, many years, more than I care to admit, because I'll age myself out at that point. But my history goes back to not only running contact centers, but also providing support roles, sales side, sales development, different industries, from currently in Quinn Street running the telemarketing space within the calls platform, financial services platform in the past, and also in disability insurance and doing that kind of work. So I've had a lot of different, it's all under the umbrella of contact center. So surprisingly enough, you wake up one day and that's where your career is. And so, but I have to say it's been an amazing ride, and I've seen a lot and done a lot in that space, and that's something we can talk about today.
Yeah, Tyler, you hit on something that I have always loved about this business, and that it touches so many different businesses, industries, and if you stay in the contact center business long enough, either as an outsourcer or if you are moving into different companies, you can learn about so many different kinds of businesses just because you're part of a contact center.
Right. Yeah. I agree completely. It's generic in a sense. So if you take that contact center and you apply it to different businesses, sometimes it's feasible, other times it's more difficult, but typically it retrofits into a lot of business types, genres. And when you like you said, if you're around long enough, you get probably a chance to do that.
Yeah.
I don't know that it would be so exciting to be in the same one all the way through, but we'll see what happens with that.
Different strokes for different folks, I think
Yeah,
is how they
exactly.
say that. So today, actually, we want to talk about insourcing, outsourcing, offshoring, and I think because so many different businesses need contact center, support center, this is relevant to so many different types of businesses. But there are all kinds of considerations that you need to take when deciding what type of contact center strategy that you want to pursue. And so that's what I really want to talk with you today. But for the people who may not be as familiar with some of the jargon, let's start with talking about some of the things I just mentioned: insourcing, outsourcing, nearshoring, offshoring. What do all of those things mean?
So I mean, I'll preface some of this conversation with, I have a dog in my room with the door closed and someone just knocked on our door, so he might not be too excited. I might have to go off camera for a second. So you can edit that out. But
Dogs welcome on this show.
yeah, there you go. For for me, it's looking at the product that you're trying to implement, how you want to go about implementing that product. So if your business unit is, insourced, where you're running, your corporate company call center product, a lot of businesses tend to want to be in that space because it's tied to culture, it's tied to, maybe legal considerations and whatnot. Plus, you might be a brand that wants to, you have the opportunity to build on the individuals within your organization. So it's maybe a job progression type function within your organization as well. I found that contact centers themselves are kind of that platform or that springboard into learning other functions. I mean, I got my start within that space that same way when I was in a financial services company. It's a good way in the door, but insourcing is a critical component, where it's, onshore, right? It's your business, you're in your people. If you're outsourcing, that you're taking that product, and I'll go with my definitions here, Rob. They might not be fitting everybody else. About outsourcing is you're having someone else basically do that work for you, and you're paying them to do that without having those same resources in your own business doing that, right? And so now if you could do both, you can do the outsourcing both onshore, nearshore, offshore. For most everybody probably watching this show, they have a general idea what that means. On just meaning US, near is close to US, and then out, and then offshore is being somewhere maybe further away from. So it's typically like Central America, South America. I guess it depends on how you want to define that, and who you're speaking with.
Yeah.
Is nearshore, how near is nearshore, or how far is offshore, I guess. So that's kind of how I think about that. And you might use those different sources in parallel, with one another, depending on your business strategy and what you're trying to accomplish. What your expectations are around those, those different types of near, offshore, language type situations come up with those as well. The ability to bring on new staff quickly versus more time to bring them to speed. There's so many different variables that go into making those decisions as a business entity that you have to, those are all just part of the whole global discussion perspective, no pun intended, with global offshore and onshore and whatnot. But within your business, how do you, what is your long-term strategy and goal for what you're doing within your contact center space?
Yeah, you brought up a really great point, and that is the nebulous nature of the terms offshore and nearshore, because they really are, in some ways, not very specific.
Right.
I even had a guest last season that owns an outsourcing contact center in American Samoa, which is about as far away from the US as you can get. And yet, technically, is that onshore?
Yeah,
Could
right.
be, right? I mean, that's a
Right.
US territory,
Yeah.
but it's certainly not close to the United States, which has both advantages and disadvantages. Some people would even consider South America as nearshore, and depending on how far into South America you go, it's not very close to the United States.
Yeah, that's true.
So there are some questions to be asked, or some clarification when you're talking with someone and they are talking about those terms. It
Yep.
really is something where there's an opportunity to just be a little more specific about what we're talking about, so that
Right.
everyone's on the same page, because not everyone is necessarily going to define those the same ways.
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
Let's talk about, I think we should talk about outsourcing in general first, regardless of whether that is onshore, nearshore, offshore, but just finding that partner. What are some of the things that I need to, particularly if I've never outsourced before? So
Yeah.
maybe I have my own contact center. I'm considering outsourcing. Number one, what are some of the important reasons that I might do that and consider it? But number two, let's also talk about some of the things that maybe I haven't thought of that I need to consider when I'm making that decision.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that when you move into that space and you're considering doing the outsourcing for whatever that might look like, that's a business decision that is, if you're doing it in office or you're currently managing it yourself, you have to really understand really the baseline of what you're trying to accomplish, right? Are you looking to augment your current staff? Are you looking to replace that current staff? Are you trying to change your margin line? Are you looking to grow more quickly in the short term and then replace back to let's say in-house when you are capable of doing that? Is it a short-term ramp that's going to go away? The reasons behind it, I think, boil down to a couple of those things, and that is one, you might not be able to hire as effectively as you can in-house if you're thinking onshore in-house versus outsourcing. The business process is not necessarily as defined in a way that you want to use your in-house resources to do that work, right? So it may be cost prohibitive to have someone who is, let's say, a company employee do that work, because it's a lot of moving of widgets. Let's just say, I like to use that term, it's just widgets, that you can have somebody do, that you can say, okay, I have this many, do that. That the capabilities that exist within that are quite vast, and there's a lot of companies out there that will help you outsource to their product, and that's you have to have a really good baseline as to why you're trying to do that, because as you get into it and you start realizing I didn't think about this, or I didn't think about how that was going to work, or how do I get these people doing that. You have to be able to come back to that baseline again from where you started, and what's the reason why we did that. So if it was we need to augment that staff, I can't hire fast enough in my office, then you're going to you potentially give up a little bit of that opportunity in-house to get to that offshore or outsource, sorry, which would then, it might make you second guess those decisions as you're going along, right? So you come back to that reason. Is it just, why are you doing that? Is that short-term hiring? Is it just, I'm trying to save money potentially? I don't want to carry that head count necessary. I want to have someone else carry that head count for me. So all things that are necessary as potential reasons to look at doing outsourcing, which is very I would say it's relatively big decision as a business to take a business process that you have in-house, that you probably have expertise in at some level. You have individuals who know certain things inside and out, and then take that and it's basically just lift that into someone else's organization and say, hey, I need you to do this work. There's unintended consequences that come with all of those decisions that always will present themselves at the worst time. Whatever that is for your business. So those are key parts, and those are really just making sure your stakeholders and anybody who's working with you in that process that can help you formulate that plan. And then I would say, it's really just what you don't know what you don't know situation when you get into this. If you're lucky enough to have someone or a group of people that have done outsourcing before, outsourcing it in, onshore, near, off, there's all sorts of different ways to approach. That's a benefit, obviously. If it's something you're taking on your own, it's really, in my opinion, it's really about building a relationship with that partnership, with that vendor, whoever that may be. You have to connect. They have to understand your value proposition. They have to understand your culture. They have to understand what you're trying to accomplish. What's your reason, right? They come back to your reason. Not everybody's just trying to save money, right? To do, whatever they're doing. There's a lot of different reasons to do it, like we talked about. The things you don't know is that there's going to be hiccups in the road. There's gonna be bumps in the road, I should say. Not hiccup. There's gonna be hiccups. But at the end of the day, that's going to if you're understanding what you're trying to accomplish with that reason, you'll be able to assess how to get through that process and go from there. So a lot of words with that, Rob, talking through that, but yeah, that's kind of probably a starting point I think that most anybody would need to take as they looked at that.
Yeah, there's some really important things in there that you just talked about. And one of the things that I think is a misnomer is that when we talk about outsourcing, we're talking about call and contact center only.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you mentioned business process, and that really is the term that we in the industry use for an outsourcer, is a BPO, a business process outsourcer. So let's take a minute. Like, what are some of the other things that you could outsource aside from just like customer support or sales?
Yeah, I mean, there's everything that you really don't want to be doing. It's tedious. I think you could start there and you can, branch off. But in all seriousness, you'd have to look at, all of the different divisions within your business, whether that's HR, IT, operations. You might have analytics. You might have some, reporting functionality. There are outsourcing, business process outsourcing partners that will do all of those things in different, some do all of them, some do parts of those. So if it's a process that, again, we come back to, what is that reason? I have to do this, but I don't have the expertise in house, or we've grown too fast for me to manage that and have a support role for that. You might want to outsource that to someone else. So yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, most people think BPO, they think call center, contact center, right? That's 100%. But the reality is there are so many different variables when it comes to that. Whether it's, processing work, whether, think like a medical field where you might have a organization that can help you just move something down the funnel to get so that someone in your office is able to process that next piece of work, right? But you don't want, maybe that comes in overnight and you don't want to try and hire someone to do that work, let's say in central time zone from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So it's really just how do you offset that so that you can be as effective with your clients' data or your own internal processes that you can then maximize what you're doing within your business rather than trying to be an expert at how do I move these pieces around to make them more efficient. So
Yeah, I have always found that if the primary reason that you are looking to outsource any function is so that you can keep your focus on your core business, then you're probably headed in the right direction.
yeah,
If you're only focused on saving money, it can still work, but it shouldn't be the motivating factor that makes you do that.
agreed. Yeah, that will only get you so far. And it loses its luster pretty quick, especially if your cost savings turns into it takes you 4 times as long to do something now. That can be it could become a real problem. So there's a lot of parts to it, and it's really whether someone's looking to outsource with taking on their own, doing their own research, finding those clients or the vendors to do it, and then building those relationships and building those flows. You can do that. You can also outsource, help. There's consultants that can help you do that same thing, and you can basically outsource your outsourcing to, to someone to help you. Right? You don't have that expertise in house. You get the expertise with someone else, and you can outsource it from that perspective. So, if you're unsure as a business leader, one, you need to, let's say you need to do it, or you've decided you need to do it. I don't think it's wise to go at it the first time without some kind of expertise involved with that, whether trying to make that work yourself, or finding a partner, whether it's referral, someone, people that in the space that are using vendors. I think that's huge. There's many consultants out there that refer you to outsource BPO partners, already. You just work with them, that consultant framework that I was talking about, and they help you narrow that down so you can have a lot less conversations, a lot more, targeted approach to what you're trying to accomplish rather than interviewing, BPO vendors to find out they're not a right fit.
Yeah, and fit is incredibly important, right? And different BPOs are going to bring different strengths to the table. So if you need 5 seats, you don't want to be having conversations with companies that typically do, 4-figure seats and up, or may not entertain anything less than 3 figures of seats, and vice versa. A company that will entertain 5 employees outsourced is not probably going to be in a position to support you if you need 300 people and you need them quickly.
No, you're right. The scale or the lack of scale is very important to understand, and that's where you either have that in-house expertise to help you understand those things that for people in the space that have done it long enough, they know inherently based on probably trial and error in their career. And then but if not, even using an external partner to help you source that, like I was sharing, like referral partners and things of that nature, they can help take some of the guesswork out. You don't have to spend your time on damage control, but rather focusing on your core business, right? Because that's the point of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. What role does technology play in making that kind of decision in your experience?
I think it does depend upon the business itself, what their expectation is with regards to what they have now, right? So if your technical stack is very complex and you like it that way, then you're going to need to look for a partner that's got something that can handle that. If it's a basic function where, all the way down to here's a file and process that file, then it just comes down to how quickly can I get that file to you to process, and then I want it back with something, right, in our system or in our CRM or something like that. So it really comes back down to that, not only the understanding that reason, but really having the right people at the table so that they can, not have a misguided understanding as to what they'll get, right? So if it's like, oh, just send us over all your API documentation and then we'll get that sent over to you, right? And versus that person's like, oh, we don't have any of those, right?
Right.
They might tell you they do, and they'll go try and work on it and figure it out, and then that's part of your lost, cost, right? That'll eat right into that for coming up to, bringing it to market. But I would say that is really relative to just your business use case in general within your own company. So
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about this idea of offshoring. I think for most people who are maybe not in the business, when they think offshore, they probably think of two countries. Probably. They probably think of India and the Philippines. So, number one, how many different places can I potentially offshore to? You don't need to give me an exact number, but
sure.
We're not limited to India or Philippines these days, correct?
Yeah, you're not. I mean, there's a yeah, that's true. Like, just like anything, what's the biggest city in the United States, right? What's the best, where you want to go, right? Let's go to New York or whatever, right? You would think that, but for as many, I would have to say that there's probably as many countries as there are that you could probably generally name off. There are going to be some kind of outsourcing happening in those cities. It just comes down to what's their, capabilities that you're looking for. Have they done work, let's say in the US versus are they in the EU, that's wherever your business is located. Asia Pac, you might have just a different set that's closer, right? It's all relative to where you're starting within your business. But yeah, that's where that expertise level comes in. If someone says, well, I need to outsource it to Philippines, India, and I go to IT versus like customer support or whatever. But if you have expertise in house, you may say, I want to look at Belize. I want to look at, Guatemala. I want to look at, parts of South Africa, right? That type of different places that you can bring your business to help you grow or stay, viable or something to that nature. There's a lot of moving parts with that. But like I said, like you said, it's like it's not just limited to those two, and that's where that expertise from a consultancy comes into play. It allows you to see what's really available and go from there.
Yeah, and there are, I imagine, functions that maybe you've outsourced in the past and it didn't go well, or maybe offshored in the past that didn't go well. What are some of the questions or considerations that you make today when now that you know something that maybe you didn't know when you were younger and had a bad experience that
Right.
help you to kind of vet where something might go?
Yeah, it's you know, you want to not be the first rodeo with that vendor, right? I guess so to speak. It's like, hey, we're getting up and running. Hey, you want to sign up with us? Uh, it's most organizations of any scale are going to want to partner with organizations that also are capable of working within their sphere, essentially, their size. Um, you know, if they're not able to do it today, if it's not currently in place, the roadmap isn't out. That's not necessarily a good place to place your bets. Oh yeah, we can do that or whatnot. But I would go as far as just, it's really about connection and relationship building within that, other individuals, other companies that you're connected with, that have done it, that you can get referred to, or go back to that consultancy place where there's a lot of partners out there that will help you, you know
Yeah.
wade through all of that, right? Those, and that's where, you know business business owners, or process owners can use that to help them succeed in that decision making, rather than having to try and become an expert in that when you're not, right? I mean,
Yeah.
don't try and become an expert in something you don't have to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Get that expert help.
Yeah, right.
Let's talk about something else as it relates to this. Are there specific job functions or industries that you look at and say, you know what, that is probably a bad thing to either outsource, or it's just a bad thing to take offshore? Or is it all on the table?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you'd think there would be there probably is a sense, like, not from my own experience, I'd say there probably is a sense of certain financial products that might be more difficult. But again, BPO vendors have amazing capabilities as well to, whether it's, there's HIPAA issues, or there's other kind of compliance, or issues that might arise. I'd say no. I'd say that I think everything's on the table to some degree. It just really That just comes down to your appetite for what you're looking to potentially outsource for, right? And so if you're looking to lift your whole business into something, that's a whole different conversation than I have this little thing I'm going to put over here, right? So maybe change your business model altogether. So no, I don't think so. I think that's an opportunity where you would need to make sure that you're comfortable with your partners that you're looking at, or the partner you've selected. And just like anything, it just comes down to just what kind of communication you've had with those individuals, what kind of expectations and agreement you have with them to what they're going to be doing specifically. I think that's really important. Just know exactly what they're going to be doing and what you're going to be doing, or the business owner is going to be doing, and how do you bring those together to be successful? That's the number one thing. So I would say no. I'd say nowadays, no. I don't think there's necessarily a genre that's, this is untouchable.
Yeah.
Like, don't do it, because we've all called our bank. You
Right.
probably made a call on a healthcare related thing, right? Or, if you're, you know, may I don't know if I've heard of this, but maybe calling a financial advisor to make a trade. I don't know if that would be something you might know. I don't know if you'd want to do that, but
I think
um,
everything that space is so online now, do it yourself, that you don't even have to call anyone.
yeah, there you go.
You can insource that to yourself at the click
Yeah,
of a
yeah, just a
button.
bot. Just do it on a bot or something.
Yeah.
Chat GPT can do everything for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So Tyler, I'm curious. I mean, obviously you've had a ton of experience on both sides of the table. Have you ever outsourced something and then decided that you wanted to pull it back, or have you had functions that you personally said, you know what, I would prefer not to outsource this?
I'd say in general terms, probably, yeah. I mean, in terms of both pulling it back and I don't really want to, or parts within the decision, right? That's a function, but not necessarily have had negative experiences around that. Pull it back, pull it back, or not wanting to do it because of a negative experience associated to it.
Right. Yeah, I
You know,
was just going to ask,
yeah.
like, what was part of that decision-making process? What were the factors that you personally took in that moment to say, well, I think we're gonna bring this in-house, or we're not going to outsource at this particular time?
Yeah, over my career, I think it comes down to the level of lift that was required to do something, and the ongoing maintenance of that support. You know, if it's equal to what you're doing, then you have to ask yourself the question of whether or not that's worth doing at that point. If that's not part of your original reason that you came back to, right? So
Yeah.
you may say that, actually it's harder to do, but this is the reason why I'm doing it. That might, that's a trade-off you have to make in that. So nothing specific, I would say, but I think that's where you really have to understand, back to the original point on that. What's that reason I'm trying to get? Well, I'm outsourcing this or offshoring this or whatever you're doing, onshore, offshore, outsource, insource. Those are all components that when you put that in play, that the expectations there, the communications there, and then at the end of the day, you live with those decisions. And if you need to pull something back, then that's another discussion and communication point. And then hopefully you don't, and hopefully it goes well. But things happen, and businesses change, leadership changes, decisions around why you do something change. Those just always have to be constantly managed and monitored. Are you getting what you expected out of it? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. If you have a good partnership, you have a good communication, you have folks that are managing those processes in the business flow, or whether it's the calls or a business process, then generally speaking, most of these folks are pretty expert in what they're doing in the BPO, and they will, help deliver the results that you're hoping for. It's not a set and forget world. I mean, you can't do that.
Not
Just
for
like
anything.
not for anything, and whether it's insourced or not, or outsourced. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the same. It's that part is no different. It's just who you're working with, who you're developing with. So I mean, if that's your expectation, I'm just going to throw over the fence and let someone else deal with it. You'll probably find that you'll want to pull some things back because something won't work right. But at the end of the day, then it's just constant process of determining what's working, what's not working, and going from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to ask you one last thing before we wrap up today. And
Okay.
that is,
Okay.
if you had a piece of advice, aside from the things that we've talked about, and I think, right, really understanding what's your motivation for doing this is probably the biggest takeaway that we could have from this. But if you were to give a piece of advice to someone who was considering making a change, whether it was to outsource or to bring something back in-house that had been outsourced, what piece of advice would you give them, or what nugget of something to think about aside from what we've already talked about? What would you throw out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to making sure that whether you are outsourcing that or taking it back, your core business has to be at the center of it. Your customers have to be at the center of it. And if you make decisions outside of that for some other reason that's not necessarily directly tied to that, you that could be something that down the road could be an issue. So I'd say, it all has to start with whatever that core function, core value of what your business is all about. If it's your customer, if it's typically it's customer, to some degree, whether it's a product they purchase, the revenue they generate, a support that you're providing to them for a value that they're expecting for, whatever that is, that has to stay at the center of what you're trying to accomplish. So I would say that's probably that my piece of advice to be to don't get lured in, or not lured, enamored by, let's say, oh, I can hire that fast, or I can save that much, or I can generate this. It has to be really like, show me, and it has to be make sure that your value of your customer or your product isn't diminished.
Yeah, it's good to remember the phrase, the grass is always greener on the other side, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's true.
Once you get there, it may or may not be. And so I think all of those things, regardless of which way you're going, it's good advice not to enter into it lightly, to really think about what you're doing, and to spend time choosing a partner, if it's choosing a partner, or really spend time understanding your own capabilities as well, if you're thinking about pulling something back and insourcing. Because once you make that decision, there will always be a pretty hefty financial impact in the short term. And if you decide to go back the other way, you've wasted a lot of time and probably a lot of money to end up exactly where you were before.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I agree with that. I agree with that statement, Rob.
Well, Tyler, it has been great having you on the show today.
Thanks.
I'm really glad that you could come and share all of your insights with the audience. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, Rob, for having me on. I appreciate it.
Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy To and is produced by me, Rob Dwyer. If you enjoy this podcast, please by all means subscribe and or rate this podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. But more importantly, please tell just one person about this podcast. Word of mouth is the best way for people to discover new content. As always, thanks for listening.